Oh man, that's a good bird.
Thank you. She's like pocket size, and
Right.
she might sleep through the interview.
Right. It's like
Oh my God.
day 365 of the government shutdown. Dave has replaced all human companions with birds.
This would be the most interesting podcast ever.
Have you become a pet detective?
What's that?
Have you become a pet detective?
No, this bird is inscrutable. I should become a pet. Oh, ouch. All right, she doesn't like to be disturbed. No petting.
All right, Dave. Well, thanks for coming on. I know you are just very, very booked at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I have to read a disclaimer at the beginning, I guess.
You can read a disclaimer.
All right. So the analysis and conclusions that any analysis and conclusions, I guess, or anything I say is that of me in my personal capacity and doesn't reflect the views of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission staff, the commission itself, or the U.S. government. So I'm an attorney at the CFTC, but I also was a partner at Dermot Will and Emery in the past. I worked at Deckert and Schulte and the United Nations and MetLife. I also have to give a couple of other pieces of biographical information. So now we're good. Now I can say anything I want.
Why do you have to give the biographical information? Just curious.
I'm not sure. Like, just to make it, I think, doubly clear that I'm really speaking my personal capacity. Like, yes, I work at the CFTC now, but this is not a CFTC endorsed thing. It's just, First Amendment, doing my thing.
Okay. That sounds good with us. Yeah.
Sorry, didn't mean to hijack the whole beginning.
No, that was great. That lends credibility to the conversation.
Thank you.
Do you have any crypto holdings you want to disclose as well?
Not yet. Hopefully someday I'll be a crypto trillionaire, but right now I'm just on the sidelines.
You still haven't bought in?
No, but if I get a crypto job, then maybe I'll
I've been literally trying to get you to buy for years now, Dave. This is
it's too much of a hassle. I have to talk to ethics, make sure it's okay, and it's just, I don't know. Like, I guess I did want to buy it when it was about $1,000, but then I don't know. I probably wouldn't have ridden it all the way up anyway. I probably would have just sold a long time ago, and I would have only bought like 1,000 worth, so I wouldn't have gotten rich anyway. Maybe now. Now's the time.
Yeah, now is the time. No, well, I guess that's good. So you're still, I guess, crypto skeptical in a way.
Yeah, I mean, well, when the shit bounces up and down like that, it's a little scary. I mean, I guess maybe the stable coins will help settle things down, or regulatory certainty, from various agencies. But there are a lot of agencies, I guess, that need to weigh in on it. So it might be a long wait for more price stability.
Sure.
And then if it is stable, then I don't know what kind of trading interest there's going to be in it. But on the other hand, like the dollar, people trade currencies all the time, so maybe it'll be fine.
Yeah. I guess we can just jump right into talking about some regulatory stuff too.
Before we jump in, we have to explain to our viewers the bird, because we weren't recording when you first came on, and so people are just going to see the bird. They're going to want to know the bird's name and the bird's story. Does the bird have a disclaimer?
The bird does not have a disclaimer. She can say whatever she wants. She might go to the bathroom on me. That's why I have this towel on me. Her name is Ivy. She's a parrotlet, which is basically a miniature parrot. I've had her, well, overall, I bought her like 10 years ago, but the poor bird's been bounced around from like 5 different owners. So I bought her to keep my original bird company, or another bird I used to have in New York. She looked kind of sad when I went away for the weekend, but who really knows? Maybe she was fine. She looks the same
Right.
But they didn't really get along. The other bird didn't really care because she was already bonded with me. So my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, she she moved out. She was living with me. She moved out. This bird liked her bird, so she took Ivy with her to hang out with Kiwi. But then Ivy started being mean to Kiwi, so Becky gave Ivy to her girlfriend, and then she started nipping the kids. So her girlfriend gave it back to Becky, and Becky turned around and gave it to her mom. And then when the bird that I had before this one died, I took it back from her mom, and then she kept Kiwi company again for a while, and Kiwi died. And this is all the bird I have left.
That is quite the trials and tribulations for that bird. She's been around the block.
Yeah, that's why you can't probably see it, but she chews her feathers off a lot, probably because she doesn't know where the hell she's going to be in any given morning. Where am I waking up today?
My first job was in a plant farm, and in the greenhouse we had, I guess they were parrots. I'm not a bird expert, but they were like much bigger than that. And there was one crazy one that was, half the feathers were missing, and it was sad, but this was a bird you did not want to get your finger close to the cage at all.
Yeah, they get really messy with you.
Yeah, that's the sign. When they're missing feathers, it's like that's a sign that they've been through a lot. Don't mess with them.
Yeah, good point. So that's the bird story.
Yep. Well, thank you. Now we can talk about crypto.
Excellent. I like the headsets. I feel left out. I don't have a cool headset like that.
Sorry, you sound good though.
Thank you. Power of Apple.
We do it so you don't get feedback, because sometimes if like your microphone picks up the speaker, then you get this like feedback loop, and it's a mess.
Oh.
These things like actually hurt your ears if you wear them for a while. Like I get this. I don't know if you have the same situation, Nick, but I get like an ear ache. Like the cartilage of my ears gets pressed down too long. It's like, I don't know. Sorry, I can't be the only one. I can't be the only one.
You need bigger ear.
Right, exactly.
They don't smush your poor ears.
Like big fuzzy earmuffs.
Yeah. I have oversized earmuffs. Speaking of that, like I had the 180s, and then I lost them somewhere, and I was looking to replace them. I was surprised how much they were, so I bought some like Chinese knockoff, but they're gigantic, so I look like an idiot. But I'm warm.
But they're warm, and who cares what you look like?
Right. Obviously, I got the
right. You got the parrot on your shoulder, giant earmuffs. Like, that man is comfortable with himself.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. So, all right, Nick, bring us into a topic here.
Yeah. No. So I know, you have worked on some issues relating to crypto at the CFTC, and more so, I think you just find it interesting to just kind of look into some of these things. So, I guess we can just start with the broad question and then just narrow down as we slowly start explaining. But, what do you think is, I guess, probably the biggest issue for crypto that you've seen so far, just as, people are starting to talk regulations and coming up?
Oh, on the regulatory side?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's a few. I mean, there's like in our little world, it's like, where does the SEC's regulation, where does their authority end, and where does the CFTC's begin? Like the SEC was early to saying like everything looks like a security to us, all tokens, all the token offerings look like security offerings to us. And then, we took some early enforcement actions also. So I guess, there's that. And then there's AML, no one realized, I think in the beginning they had to worry about AML, but I think OFAC or one of the other agencies also kind of was one of the first agencies to be out there saying, hey, you have to think about this, and they've updated it. So AML in general is another, most of the jobs I see are AML related.
Anti-money laundering?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Your customer and all, Bank Secrecy Act, all the related stuff. And then I guess like state versus federal, but I guess that's really mostly in the AML context. Like, you have to be like a money service licensee or something at the state level. And
money transmitter.
Money transmitter, thank you.
Yep.
and then you also have the federal regulation, which is weird because usually like the federal regulation preempts the state regulation, but I guess not in that area. So I think those are the big ones that I could think of.
Yeah, I mean, I know kind of on your first topic, like the SEC versus CFTC thing, I think that's something probably a lot of people don't necessarily know about, is that you sort of have this like, you know, contest to see who can get, you know, grasp of, you know, do you think the CFTC is trying to get crypto? Do you think the SEC is trying to get crypto, or do you guys just not even want to touch it?
Yeah, who wants it? Is it like a hot potato, or like who's going to fall on the hand grenade?
Well, it's kind of weird. I mean, I think like if, you know, just talking about most tokens and cryptocurrency just being traded, then, you know, it's not really ours to worry about unless there's manipulation, you know, like any other commodity. Like if somebody manipulates corn, you know, even the cash market, then we can go after it, or possibly if there's fraud. But then if you have derivatives, then it gets way more complicated. And some people think like maybe some smart contracts or have some elements of derivatives, and then like the things like Augur, prediction markets, those can be regulated by us. They look somewhat like swaps or options, or well, options or type of swap. So there's that, and then so I guess there's a lot of facets to it, really. But I think, you know, the chairman have always been saying, or they've had several announcements that they are working together to not have that. Like we have traditionally butted heads and like been, you know, over the years. I mean, like the CFTC and SEC have had like some land grabbing kind of things. Like the SEC sued, I think the Chicago Board of Trade, like in the 80s, when they tried to list a product that the SEC thought was a security, and the court said no. And then we intervened in a case. I mean, this is beyond us and the SEC, but like FERC went after some manipulation. I think it's Amaranth, or one of the traders from Amaranth went after, manipulated something on NYMEX, and it had an effect in the FERC regulated over-the-counter energy markets, and they had some new anti-fraud authority went after it, and we intervened. Like they went after those guys, and we intervened to say it's our exclusive jurisdiction, and the court agreed, which I thought was a bad decision, definitely a bad outcome. So we had a really small penalty in the end, and FERC was going to assess something like, you know, dozens of times as large. But just even so, I thought like if it affects their market, like they have this fraud authority, I don't know what it means without that. So anyway.
Well, I think like, you know, probably the most recent example of maybe a land grab was like the swaps regulations. You know, there's probably a little bit of a parallel, at least in, you know, of trying to sort of regulate something new from here to like swaps, would you say?
Oh, well, I guess, well, right. I mean, well, that true, but different than the past. Like that's not like, well, there's a lot of things going on. So, right, swaps were not regulated before that, and by and large. So I guess it was but to me, it made sense after the financial crisis and the role of derivatives. But you're right. I guess like we were required by the Dodd-Frank to work with the SEC to find out where the lines were between swaps, which were ours, and security-based swaps, which were theirs. And then Congress, said there could be mixed swaps. They recognized there were these products that have elements of both. And so it was right. It was 2 years of bumping heads with the SEC, and negotiating.
Now you both have jurisdiction over some of them, right?
Right. Although they haven't finished their rulemaking because we're like 10 times as good as them. We did it in like 2 years. I mean, at least, that's kind of overstating, but like the swap definition was done in 2 years. And then everything is based on that. We have jurisdiction over swaps. You have to define what a swap is. But, we finished, I think we only have like 2 or 3 left, and some we could have finished, but we decided to wait to harmonize internationally, like I think capital requirements. So that makes some sense. But, they did a lot, but then they said that none of them would be none of their security-based swap rules will be effective until all of them are done. So, and that is something people asked us also, but I think Gary Gensler, to his credit, saw that, you know, the government could change hands and then we might be stopped in our tracks. So we got almost everything done. So we have a regime, and now people, from what I understand, tell the SEC, hey, you might have a point, like maybe it should be tweaked a bit, but just go with the CFTC approach, just because they all their systems are set up for it, and it'll cost them not much more to, you know, do everything the SEC way plus our way. So
right, you know, but I think that the swaps market's super interesting from, you know, from the crypto and point, because, you know, a lot of people, I guess, are calling for, say, like a new regime for cryptocurrencies in a way.
oh, yeah.
You know, something like that. Like, you know, I think if you were to look at that, you know, you know, would that even be something that's doable? You know, would it be something that would we want that? You know, like, it was, you know, like looking at the swaps regulations, like I don't know if any of the former swaps traders or anyone like that was really necessarily ecstatic when they came down with the new regulations.
Right. But I think, but at least the big banks, for the most part, I mean, they have a lot of problems with specifics, but in general, they're in favor of regulation. And I've heard this over the years. I mean, this isn't the first time some group or market participant has asked for a unique regulatory scheme to fit them, and it's not crazy. It's not, but it is kind of too much to ask for the most part. I think, because a lot of, not all of the regulatory scheme is impossible for crypto to fit into. I mean, some things, like on the SEC side, I understand, like the custody rules don't really work with blockchain transactions or holding things on the blockchain. So, you know, it needs to be adapted, I guess, for it to really be possible for like regulated mutual funds to do things in crypto. But, you know, like there's nothing stopping an exchange that wants to trade crypto from registering as a designated contract market or a SEF, or getting a clearing license. You know, like LedgerX is SEF, and I think it's DCO as well. So it's, you know, hard and expensive and takes resources. There's always a trade-off between, like, you know, you don't want to put too much burden on startups, then you know, promote the incumbents or help them, you know, with their moat and keep people out. But that's one side. But the other side is customer protection. I mean, there's, you know, vast amounts of money at stake, and it's an important part of the economy. So, you know, crypto is fun, but it's not like critical to. I mean, we've gotten along without it so far. So, like, the world's not going to end if crypto actors, you know, have to comply for the most part with the existing scheme. I mean,
Well, wouldn't you say that that's sort of, you know, the argument though? Like, you know, it is sort of burdensome to go through the current scheme. Crypto's not big enough to take down the whole system. Why are we forcing them to go through this giant scheme? You know?
Well, it's not only systemic risk issues. There's also customer protection, and that is even kind of looms larger in this area. You know, because there have been a lot of bad actors, unfortunately, like options. There's nothing inherently wrong with an option, but there was a lot of abuse. So the options were illegal for a while, and the CFTC. I don't remember if it was right when we started or after, but there were a couple of periods, I think, where options were illegal, and then we had the authority to make them not illegal. So, and yeah, I'm not saying like there shouldn't be any accommodation. You know, there's certain ways where it makes sense. Like, you know, people want to trade on the blockchain knowing the risks. Okay, but maybe there should be a standard disclosure document. And, you know, in the CFTC regulated world, like brokers, FCMs have to give standardized disclosure documents to their customers. So maybe that should be tweaked for crypto. You know, there should probably be crypto specific disclosures. And I haven't really followed if the NFA has already done that. I think they might have said something along those lines. And, you know, it's kind of understood, like, at least for the securities side, like you have to disclose all the risks. So when you're selling shares in a commodity pool, then they already have to disclose whatever specific crypto specific risks there are. So, you know, right. So it should be, tweak. But then there's also the resource issue. Like, we're just a small agency. Like, there's 600 and change, I think, but not everybody in that number is like writing rules and everything. So, and there's the whole regular existing regime to administer. Like, we're in the middle of doing a number of rules to fix our reporting, or to improve the reporting. So, I don't know that we have the bandwidth to just put in place a whole new regime, but Congress maybe should. Like the whole debate about actual delivery. I think I've told this to a bunch of people. I think the concept you can have actual delivery of an intangible is ridiculous. We already had the delivery concept for forwards, which already is distorted when you apply it to intangibles. So to me, like, actual delivery has to mean something more. And one of my colleagues
can
has
I
said,
jump in and ask about, because I'm an outsider in this conversation, and I think I'm understanding about 5% of it.
Sorry, you want me to step back a bit?
Jeez, yeah, but I don't know where to step back to.
Well, we can maybe back up. The actual delivery piece is probably.
That's a good. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask.
It could be an hour-long discussion, I think, on its
own.
You had so.
Sure.
For those, I guess I can give a little bit of background on. There was the request. There was that proposal that was last year.
Proposed interpretation.
They gave a proposed interpretation on actual delivery, on what it actually means in terms of cryptocurrencies. So I don't know.
You should tell them it's in the statute. Like, there's actual delivery is language in the Commodity Exchange Act.
So yeah, if you want to explain that, like, what is actual delivery and why is that important?
Okay. So
Thank you.
Yeah. So there are requirements that the CFTC administers, for people that are intermediaries in commodity derivatives trading. And there's an extra layer, or actually, I'm sorry, it was just made illegal in Dodd-Frank. It was made illegal for certain less sophisticated entities to trade commodities on leverage, or if it's margined or financed, with certain exceptions. Like, I think securities are accepted, and also if you deliver the commodity in question within 28 days, then it's not illegal. With the idea that 28 days is very generous, but the idea is, like, if it's just a spot or a cash market transaction, then it doesn't need, like any other cash or spot market transaction, the CFTC doesn't really regulate it except for manipulation. So, and different commodities have different periods that are considered like the spot market. Like, if I just sold
when you're talking about delivery, you're talking about someone delivering corn, like physically, like the actual commodity itself being delivered, by the FedEx guy to your warehouse.
That's the basic concept of delivery, but then there are commodities that are not physical, like securities actually are not certificated for the most part. They're just like a book entry in DTCC. And then there's like environmental credits, regs and all kinds of other environmental products. So those are also just, there's no physical manifestation of them. They're just
So if I can sort of sum it up, like, if delivery is sort of important because it determines whether something is a derivative or not. Because if you would say, like, I'll sell you this corn, at a price we can determine at delivery, then that's okay as long as delivery happens within 28 days. So if in a week I give you the corn, the price of corn is, $1 for this piece of corn, you pay it, that's fine. That's not a derivative, even though there was like some price risk for that week.
What's with is 28 days like just some arbitrary number? Like, what's with the 28 days part of it? Why 28, not 30?
I think there's some state level commodity code for certain purposes, and for some reason 28 days is a number that was chosen for that. I'm not sure why, but we had some old report from the 90s, I think, like, for some reason, like, sugar has a really long delivery period. And I think gas might sometimes take a while, and like oil if you're shipping it across the ocean. So it's more
Oh, so
complicated.
it's a time frame based in actual like delivery time, like
Right,
how
and
long
it's
it takes
different.
to
Right,
physically move something.
yeah, and it's different for different commodities. So I'm not sure why Congress decided to just have one monolithic, one uniform delivery deadline for all commodities, but they did, and we can make it longer, which is more lenient, but we weren't given the authority to make it shorter. And I think that's one thing that the commission pointed out in the proposed interpretation. They just said they asked some questions about it, but there's really nothing we can do. Like Congress has to act on that. I mean, it should be much tighter. Like there's no reason you should be able to, have this finance trading for 28 days. I mean, I guess like if Congress thinks that it's bad to play around, like to have it be like more like a derivative, then the delivery deadline should be tailored to whatever it takes. So if it, and I know it fluctuates like based on how much mining is going on for Bitcoin. So if it maybe you get like if it takes an hour, maybe you give them a day or something to have a little cushion, but it doesn't need to be 28 days. It's always going to be delivered the same day.
So like, back to trying to explain this, like the reason that this is, people in the crypto world are sort of interested in this is because, like if you do an exchange transaction, like I can buy Bitcoin from you and then you just keep the Bitcoin and I keep my money, and then we have to do the transaction in 28 days where we, trade the Bitcoin for the price of Bitcoin. And that's, even if like I don't have the money now, it can be fully leveraged. That's completely fine, because as long as it's done in 28 days, then it's delivered. Right.
Yeah.
So that's an abuse of this old rule that was leeway given because of the physical transportation aspect of it. But in the Bitcoin world, that's an unnecessary length of cushion that people can sort of manipulate or leverage to make it act like another financial product.
I think that's the idea. Yeah.
Does that make sense? Was I making sense at all there, or sounding really stupid?
No, that does make sense. A good encapsulation of it. I mean, and there's nothing like inherently evil if people want to do this. I guess it's not like immoral, but the problem is that it's been subject to abuses, and like there's I guess in a rolling spot. I mean, like people tend to lose. Like the longer they're in these transactions, they just tend to lose. Like there's leveraged currency trading. People have just tended to lose a lot, and there have been bad actors in that industry. We've got like separate regulations for that kind of trading, and this 28-day thing was modeled off of those other restrictions.
So you want to explain the rolling spot as well?
Yeah, I'll try to be quick. So basically, I think you have an exposure to currency fluctuations. You pick your currencies like dollar for yen or whatever, and you'll say it's like, I think in the typical currency trade settles in 2 days. So you do a trade for 2 days, and then but you're allowed to just roll it forward for another 2 days forever. So it's really like you have a constant exposure to the exchange rate, and they used to allow tons and tons of leverage. I think we are the NFA impose some tighter restrictions now, but it's still you still can have some high amount of leverage. I think typically the currencies don't fluctuate that much day to day, but when they do, like there's like I forget what Switzerland did, but Switzerland changed something about their approach to their currency, and people weren't expecting it. And it blew up. I think one of our foreign exchange brokers, and that's when we tighten up the leverage requirements, and I don't know. So
basically that's why you have to deliver something. You can't just like say like, oh, we'll do it for these 30 days and then like renew your agreement to deliver in 30 new days. You actually have to do the delivery piece.
Yeah, we're basically saying like, if you want to do derivatives, then register like everybody else who does derivatives. Like if you're doing something, if you're just trying to sneak around, or if you're trying to create some products, you don't have to comply with our rules, then we're not happy with that, because the rules are there for a reason, to protect customers. There's disclosures, and you have to take tests for people who sell to individuals, and you're subject to discipline. You can be kicked out if you're not even in the first place, then it's not really a problem for you. So there's capital requirements in some cases. There's if you're an exchange, then we might go out and look at how you're doing your oversight if you're a registered exchange with us. And so, there are a lot of reasons to have the regulation, and we're not fond of people always trying to skirt our regulations. I mean, it's great when, we do like financial creativity, and that is also built into our law. Like 4C of the Commodity Exchange Act gives us the authority to let people out of whatever we want in the act, with some exceptions for financial innovation. It's supposed to be, there's some parameters, like it's supposed to be like sophisticated people who are doing these transactions, but so Congress tries to strike a balance. Like there tend to be a lot of people being screwed, so then regulation gets beefed up, and then as the memories fade, then loosen up, and we're like, you don't need to, we'll give you some relief, and then there's another crisis. It just constantly is going back and forth. It's hard to find the perfect balance.
Yeah, between like what constitutes someone, like a group of people getting screwed,
right,
versus them screwing themselves.
Oh, well, if people, I guess it kind of depends. Well, sometimes like people raise money to trade commodities and they never trade it. They just buy fur coats and have nice travel and houses and cars. So that's the easy example. That's just out and out fraud. And that's people being screwed. They're just being lied to. I guess, if people raise the money to trade commodities, cryptocurrency or any other commodity, and they do trade and they just suck at it, maybe if they were, I don't know, if they were registered, it wouldn't necessarily make a difference. But there are some testing requirements, so they have to know some basics. And I guess like there's also rules that prohibit people with certain felony convictions, I think, from being registered. So, if you have people like that who've already defrauded people and they're coming back in. But you're right, like if you just want to trade, like, and you're willing to leverage it up and take more risk, and you can bear the risk of loss, and you just don't do a good job, you're just not a good trader or whatever, the market surprised you, then right, it's not like somebody screwed you. It's just,
Well, I think you guys came up with statistics on that where, I think it was like 70% of futures and options traders lose money. And, it was like one of those investor protection videos saying like, don't trade futures. It was like basically like, be safe and don't be stupid. And
just go to Vegas and just put a coin in the slot. You only lose a little at a time.
Well, I think like statistically you have better odds than trying to beat, the pros.
Yeah, well, that's a good point too, right? There's a lot of professionals, and if you're just dabbling. Well, I had one friend who was a lawyer at Schulte. He kept showing me screenshots. Oh, look at this! I made $200 before breakfast trading futures, and he was a jerk. So hopefully, he lost some money.
Sure, he'll watch and reach out to you. But anyway, we gotta get back to the delivery piece. We didn't finish our delivery discussion.
You're putting the bird to sleep. I'm just kidding. She was asleep from the beginning.
So, what's so I guess the bigger issue with crypto and delivery is that it's really hard to define what actually is delivery, because I think you had written a paper on this, or an article or two.
Yeah. Well, I guess mine. Yeah, that's right. I guess we talked. Well, I covered a bunch of different issues, but I guess there are a few issues with actual delivery. Well, there's what I mentioned earlier. Like, is it even possible to actually deliver something that's not physical in form? But then putting that aside, if you do,
well, can we actually dig into that for a second?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess if I could ask you to play your own devil's advocate there, what would be the argument for being able to say, yes, you can deliver something intangible, like, I don't
A
know.
stock. Well, I mean, a
Yes.
stock is intangible, right?
That's right. So it's been,
Isn't it
I
a piece
guess,
of paper somewhere though that's being held on your behalf?
not paper anymore, really, but there's an entry, there's a record, in like DTCC. They administer all the transfers, I think, for most of the stock market. So yeah, there's a book entry somewhere, and the same with the environmental credits, like Reggie or whatever, whoever's administering the program.
Well, let's just
Uh,
even take the financial instruments out of it. Like, okay, I just received an email. That's
hmm.
why is not delivered into my inbox?
I guess right in that context it is, and we discussed, not in the crypto context, we discussed delivery of intangibles in the rulemaking that we did to define what a swap is, and we said, like, I think it's control and use. It demonstrates that something's been delivered. So I guess in the crypto, if we applied that to the crypto context, we'd say, like, I guess if you've got the keys you need to move it somewhere else, then maybe that's enough. But then the proposal also mentioned that you can't have a lien on it anymore. Like if there was a loan and whoever lent you the money still has a lien on it, they could take it back. You could argue that both ways,
So as
because
long as you had the tools and the potential to be able to move it or do something with it, then maybe
Well,
that's delivery.
could be right. We haven't finalized the interpretation, but like just playing devil's advocate, yeah, you could
Yeah.
argue that. Right.
Okay.
well, and then I think this whole issue of actual delivery sort of came up after a Bitfinex action, right?
I don't know if it was specifically related to that. Maybe, like, I don't know if they asked us, but like some other parties, I think, submitted a request for rulemaking, and then I think somebody else asked for no action or interpretive letter. So at least a couple of
The exchanges or people who wanted to know, because I think the bigger issue originally was they were doing, I think it was Bitfinex, where they were delivering it to a multi-signature wallet that they controlled. And then whenever they would deliver it to the multi-sig wallet, then they would basically just, use their two keys to sign it back onto the exchange. And then it was delivered. But the CFTC said that, no, it's not delivered because the person,
they don't have any control, right?
the person
Right.
had control, but the exchange also had control, which was the problem. And they said, so that didn't count as actual delivery.
Okay.
That was, so like, okay, we got that. Like, you actually have to give the person
That makes
control.
sense. I can see their argument there.
But now, like back to Dave's point, like, if the intangible isn't, if it can't be delivered in general, that's sort of a different piece.
Yeah. I mean, the agency seems to be over that hurdle. Like they didn't seem too troubled by that. So I mean, and you can make some distinction. Like maybe there's something that you would consider to be delivered, like if you do forward transactions, that's where delivery originally came up, like to distinguish forward transactions from futures transactions. Like Nick was talking about the corn before, like, yeah, you actually give it to somebody, it's delivered. So
What's the difference between a future and a forward?
well, delivery is one. Like futures, hardly any of them actually deliver the underlying commodity from the seller to the buyer, whereas forwards, that's one of the defining features, is there generally is delivery. And you also have commercial participants in the forwards, like a farmer and then like a cereal producer on opposite sides, whereas futures, it could just be like high frequency traders, banks.
Well, I love how you say generally, because
well, that's what I was getting at before. So it's supposed to be delivery, but then like if you got some big trading operation, like you find out that you've traded with the same entity you've got 10 people on a trading desk and they have 20 people on their trading desk, and you've done a bunch of transactions intending to deliver, but you find like you're delivering oil to them and they're delivering oil to you at the same day in the same location. So it's like, why don't you just agree to not deliver either, so you don't incur like the cost of delivering in dock charges and unloading charges and whatever, and risk there'll be an oil spill. So if you meant to deliver it when you traded it originally, but then like for those kind of reasons you don't, or you're planning to deliver corn, but there's a big fire or something in your fields and there's no more corn, so you can't deliver it, like force majeure. So there's some reasons that you might not deliver that are okay with us. So I forget where I was going with this. Like, was I trying to distinguish between? I was saying like there could be like some reasons, like we say, yeah, that would be delivery. Maybe like if you plan to deliver the offsetting commodities and you don't, but then I guess maybe for actual delivery that might not work. Like, there has to be some difference between actual delivery and delivery. Like the word actual has to mean something, so it has to be some distinction. So maybe it's not okay to even have the offsetting deliveries for actual delivery purposes.
Sure. And then I think the other piece that you specifically wrote about was kind of the finality piece. If you want to talk about that at all.
Oh, is this in the shorter version, Matt's shorter article?
Yeah. So, where you talk about how Bitcoin's not final. So how like is the commission going to have, some standard that says like, well, after 6 confirmations on the blockchain, it's considered delivered, versus, just is it when the transaction takes place, or is it, like what happens if there's a fork? And
or you're dead what's it called, like strand of the blockchain or something, it doesn't get picked up on, eventually it just
like
dies.
An abandoned chain.
Yeah, thank you.
Or fork.
So these are the things that Matt actually noticed and came up with. I just helped him. He was the main driver on that shorter article, so you should have a separate one of these with Matt. He would love that.
We can do that.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess, I don't know. I guess the commission didn't address these, so this was Matt's point. Like there are, I guess, who knows how many issues that weren't addressed. Like I think the commission tried to address the real big issues that people focus them on. But yeah, so it's, if it's not covered in the interpretation, it's anybody's guess if we would consider that actual delivery or not, or a court would. You could say that, well, if it was, like it was confirmed like to the standard, however many miners confirmed it, or you didn't know at the time that it was going to be an abandoned chain, so why second guess it? I'm not sure how the agency would look at that, but I guess those issues will have to be addressed by some people at some point, right? Or unless they just don't worry about it, like, fine, come find us.
What is the example we're talking about, Nick? I'm a little lost. Are we talking about if somebody delivers and then there was a fork that happened?
Yeah, I think it's like a very obscure example to try and time the actual delivery, like when it happens, because like technically there is no finality in Bitcoin, so you have to sort of pick some arbitrary number, and most exchanges really pick,
Finality just means that
once you agree
transaction
that
actually happened.
So that transaction happened on the chain, so it wasn't like abandoned.
And because there's always the potential for a fork to happen at any time, that therefore you could never have finality, or at least you'd have finality with an asterisk.
Right, you would, so you always have to pick, and I think usually you wait, like 5 or 6 transactions on most exchanges, similar to like, if you deposit your new Bitcoin onto Coinbase, like you can't trade it right away. You usually have to wait an hour or two, because
I don't know if the agency would be that worried like about things that happen way later. Like if you have the thing delivered to you such that you control it, you can move it off the platform, you can go go buy something with it or do whatever you want with it. And if something happens 2 months later, I don't think we're going to be second guessing that. I mean, just based
Sure.
on how the agencies approach things in general.
All right. No, I mean, I think that gives us a little bit more clarity, like on the actual delivery piece. It seems like that's what a lot of people at the moment are trying to do, because, they, at least that was really why I think a lot of the exchanges were asking for more clarification on the rules, is because they sort of don't want to go register.
Yeah.
Like, I guess, do you see that as too, like, doesn't that in and of itself sort of say that the regulations are a little bit burdensome whenever you have giant, companies making tens of millions of dollars, and they like will literally like try and find any loophole in the book to avoid registration?
I don't know if that proves anything. Like, who wants to pay a lot of money and have all this headache to register when you don't have to? So it's just smart. Like, I mean, the swap market developed. I mean, they're really futures. I mean, there's not much difference between some of them, and futures, and they developed off exchange. They could have just traded futures instead, but they're not customized enough. So they developed swaps, which are customizable, and they didn't want to register. I mean, now it got sucked in because a lot of bad things happened during the crisis, and derivatives, had a big impact on spreading the crisis. So at least some like credit default swaps and used in like synthetic CDOs and things. But so I don't know. I don't think it means that the system is flawed. Like, they just don't want to pay the money. Yeah. And now, like, okay, so they're making tens of millions, but they're probably making less now, I would guess, because
Sure.
the volumes are down, and so to the extent they make money on volumes, they're making less. So then it makes even more sense to not want to be regulated, right? Because you have less money to pay all those big bills.
Right, but that's what I mean. Like, isn't it like really odd that you don't have companies, who like they want to do it, they want to trade derivatives, but then it's just so burdensome that like it's not like we have just influx of new DCMs that come about every year. It's
Oh,
it's very, very rare.
true. I mean, the problem is that, I mean, if you're a DCM and individuals can trade on it, if you're a CEF, then you can't. So we could be a little bit more lenient, I guess, in reviewing those. And I think it's less expensive to be a CEF than DCM. But there's when individuals and small traders could trade on something, and you have people like doing stupid things like selling all their assets and retirement plans to go put it all on crypto. We have to worry about these kind of people.
Sure. Well, for Mike, I think this is, and anyone listening, like, that's like CEFs and swaps, for instance. Like, normal people can't trade swaps, right?
Right.
That's just, you have to be an ECP or eligible contract participant, basically like the CFTC's accredited investor. So you can't go do that. But like, the other piece that I would argue on is, like, with the necessity, the one argument I've heard, like especially with the blockchain piece, is like, so if you want to do like a registered options contract, like right now, like all options, you need to also have a clearinghouse. Does that make sense for like decentralized options? Like smart contract options, for instance, with crypto, like they sort of clear themselves. Like,
Now, so the clearinghouse, what is there as an intermediary in this process? What do they do that's separate from what the exchange does?
Well, they step in the middle between buyers and sellers. They become the seller to every buyer and the buyer to every seller, so you don't have to worry about the creditworthiness of the other side of the trade. And they have a great deal of assets at their disposal. They have their own capital at stake at some point. They have like credit lines from banks, and they have member contributions. Like they have clearing members who also put up some capital in case there's a default. So they do a lot of things. And I mean, we have.
So they ensure that someone makes good on the one side of the trade, or
Right. So that's right. So the exchange just like provides a place for you to meet, from buyers and sellers to meet. I mean, you know, do other things. They surveil the markets and stuff, and have rules for orderly trading and stuff. But that's the key thing. But we've been more lenient, I think. Like, I mean, we have at least two. I think Ledger X and Cantor. There's a couple, or no, Nadex, I think, two or three. So they have clearinghouses, but they require their contracts to be fully collateralized. It's kind of what Nick was saying, like, what's the worry if you're self-clearing and you don't have to worry about the other side. But I think actually even like with the decentralized, you still have to worry about the other. But anyway, putting that aside, right now we have 2 or 3 entities that, unlike the typical clearinghouse, like the normal derivatives trade with a lot of leverage. Like, if you have, you know, $1 million of exposure, you don't have to put up $1 million to do the trade. You put up like 50,000 or whatever. But these entities I'm talking about, they're associated with exchanges that require people to put up 100% of what their possible exposure is. Like if you.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, don't you think it's still like, so like they literally have 100% of everything put up? Like, what is the need for the clearinghouse at that point? You know, like, couldn't you just sort of enforce that at the exchange level?
Possibly. Yeah, I guess. Possibly. I mean, but I guess that's just the construct we have. So, I mean, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, but it's
because you know that's like the whole deal with cryptocurrency. So you know, like I can lock money. So I'll lock Ether into a smart contract. You'll lock Bitcoin into a smart contract, and then they'll transfer to each other. You know, we'll agree to trade a certain amount, like in 2 months. Like that's a derivative. It's going to go based upon some price in 2 months. All the possible exposure is locked in those smart contracts, and it's going to trade automatically. You know, like what's the clearinghouse? Is it Ethereum, the blockchain that it's running on, or is it?
What if there's some flaw in the programming logic in the smart contract? It doesn't happen. Who's going to deal with it? So you need someone to. I mean,
sure.
Clearinghouse. Yeah, I mean, maybe they would make good on it if the money didn't transfer for some reason. So someone has to be like thinking about these things and dealing with the fallout, and like, yeah, maybe the exchange could do it, but you know, they do other things. Like, I mean, so you could consolidate them, but we have this separate function. You know, it could be some of the same people. I don't think every single role has to be duplicated. You could have some people doing dual roles, like they're doing something for the exchange and they're doing something for the clearinghouse. So it's not like total duplication, but you know, there's different issues with clearing than there are with
Sure.
trading. So
that's like, you know, I guess it comes down to the issue. Like, do you think, like, at least to me, it seems like fully collateralized products are sort of different in almost risk profiles than not fully collateralized products, you know, especially from like a systemic risk point.
Definitely. And we've reflected that in, we've given some relief. Like there have been commission orders for at least one of these, and maybe all of them, like waiving some of the rules for, that don't make sense when it's fully collateralized. So yeah, I mean, I forget which exchange it was, but I read it at some point. I mean, so we recognize that sometimes, and we don't make them comply with things that make no sense, but they went through the process. They submitted a petition and we evaluated it, and you know, maybe they didn't think about some angle, and our clearing staff did, and there's some back and forth, and then but we did give them some relief from a lot of requirements. So
maybe crypto should submit a petition.
Yeah, I mean, I think people are working with the commission a lot. I mean, they're forming, I industry associations, and they're talking to Congress. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure there will be more changes over time. I mean, it should be done at the congressional level. They could fix a lot of this. Like they could say, sorry, states, you're out of the money transmitter business, licensing business. It's just going to be OFAC and whatever. They could say SEC, you get tokens, the CFTC gets everything else, or some other split. So Congress could really deal with this a lot. Like until they do, we need to be thinking about it. And the SEC supposedly is going to come out with some guidance for ICOs, right? Which I think people are waiting for. And they also have to deal with custody, like how that can apply for, on the blockchains. Registered funds are really worried about that, I think. So, we're trying.
Yeah, well, I think the guy who currently hasn't been to work in 4 months probably doesn't have much faith in Congress changing much.
Yeah, well, Congress is, I guess, kind of working. I don't know what they're doing, but they must be doing something.
Yeah. So I think, we just had a couple other questions for you, though.
Okay.
So, I know you sort of said it at the beginning. So, like, what are your opinions of, I guess, stable coins, if you have any?
Well, I didn't understand what they were for originally, and I asked somebody, like, what was the point of this? And they said, I guess, like, if you want to stash it somewhere, and I guess if you're not a big fan of the traditional financial system, like, you just take it out, put it in the bank, then I guess you got to pay taxes. Maybe you do, actually, if you put it in a stable coin, but I don't know. I guess if you don't like the financial system, you stash it in a stable coin before you decide what you're going to do with it next. But I don't know, it's kind of weird because, like, Bitcoin was supposed to perform that function by itself, right? But it's not. So I guess to the extent you need some price stability, then it seems like a pretty good idea.
Well, do you think some of them could be derivatives?
I think you talked to me about some funky aspect of it. I forgot, but just occurred to me. I mean, like, just typical one, like if you just
You haven't looked into everything I sent you, Dave.
No, sorry. We have to have a follow-up. Have to make me do my homework.
Yeah.
But I don't know, if you just have something that's issued and it's like it's got dollars behind it, I'm not sure. But then you talked about some like floating exchange mechanism or something. So, I guess it really depends because it's such a new thing. But yeah, so it doesn't occur to me like just something that's backed 100% by dollars or whatever is a derivative. Like if you just have that behind it and you just use it as a currency, but it really kind of depends.
Sure. Yeah, and then I guess last question, we can kind of tap into your historical all your wisdom that you have, Dave.
Right.
I guess based on your time with CFTC and all your time, you've sort of seen like all these new regimes come into place, whether it was in the early 2000s or even with the advent of high frequency traders in the futures market or the whole swaps market change. Like what did you kind of learn from those advances in technology and how the regulators dealt with it? And how do you think that'll play out in crypto?
We're historically seen as a pretty industry friendly regulator, or at least open minded. Like there was one bank regulator that supposedly was viewed as kind of captured by industry. I don't know if we were ever viewed that way.
You guys have crypto dad, so
right. I mean, that's kind of, I don't know, it's a little weird to me when you're like kind of have this affectionate nickname from industry. That's a little much, I think. But
are you calling us industry? You calling the crypto people industry?
Like ecosystem, whatever, doesn't matter. So I guess I would anticipate the same kind of approach going forward, right? Like, Giancarlo is not going to be there that much longer because they already threw out a name of who might be nominated to replace him. But from what I understand, that the guy who's nominated is supposedly like similar mindset. So I mean, who knows if like a Democratic commissioner or chairman takes over if the presidency changes. But Massa didn't do anything radical, I don't think. Gensler was put there to put a lot of regulations in place to make Dodd-Frank happen. So that's a different time, and I guess all bets are off if there's some other crisis that happens. But failing that, I think I would expect to see us continue to engage with cryptocurrency people and think about the issues and probably provide some relief, where it makes sense, and do some more enforcement when people are like just flouting it. I think it was reported in the press that we may be investigating Augur, and I don't know if that's true. And like they have all these disclaimers that made it clear they really thought about this stuff. And so I don't know, it's all these prediction markets. I mean,
well, prediction markets that by themselves are regulated by the CFTC, right?
I mean, I think they look like swaps or futures or options.
Well, so. I think just prediction markets, like, isn't it like the Iowa political prediction market, and like they sort of have registered exemptions, right?
Yeah, well, I think staff no action relief. We've given them no action relief, so, like with conditions, like you can't bet more than this much. So it's really small scale. It's not supposed to be like a big money making venture. It's just supposed to help them come up with political insight, or there might be other ones like that, like maybe New Zealand, I want to say. But yeah, otherwise, right, like the things that those instruments look like, binary options, or other things we regulate. So yeah, if people want to just go off and do that and thumb their noses at us, then they run the risk of unpleasant tap on the shoulder from our enforcement people.
Yeah, and then I don't know, do you have an opinion on whether or not derivatives can be too decentralized for regulation?
Nothing's too decentralized for regulation. Nothing can ever escape our clutches. Yeah, I mean, I was actually going to write an article about this, but then Commissioner Quintenz actually came out with this presentation or a speech that kind of hit on a couple of good points that I was going to make. So I was like, I don't know. I mean, I could still flesh it out, but yeah, I mean, I think that no matter how you structure it, it still might have elements of things you regulate. Like the SEC said, the Dow was still issuing securities, notwithstanding it's decentralized, and I guess maybe the people who set it up, like, if you're involved in setting it up or administering it, you have to worry about it, even if you like disperse it like Augur and tries to say, oh, well, we're not touching it now, it's out of our control, haha. But you made it that way, so maybe.
Well, I mean, to make the argument, like, you had the SEC did come out and say, like, so Ethereum was a security when they issued, but now they're sufficiently decentralized and now they're a commodity. So, like, can you be like a derivative and then be sufficiently decentralized to become then, like, say, a protocol or something like that?
I don't know. I mean, like in the SEC example, they can still go and spank the people who did the offering when it was a security, even though it might not be now. So maybe not every Ether transaction is a security transaction, but they can still go punish whoever did it before, right?
So I guess even if it was a security then, that means even if it isn't security now, you can still punish them for what they did then.
Yeah, I mean, as long as the statute of limitations hasn't run. And then on our side, we don't have like a swap issuance concept like the SEC does. So I think we look at each transaction as it occurs. Like, is this a swap? Is this a swap? Is this a future? Is this an option? So yeah, like so if two people do a swap, just because it's not through an exchange doesn't mean anything. So we won't go after anyone for not registering as a DCM, or maybe we will, but like, let's just say there's no exchange in the picture. There's no one had to register as a DCM or a CEF, but if you have two people doing a swap, I mean, it has to be reported. You have to keep records. If someone does so much of it, like they're actually a dealer, like if they're standing in the middle and they didn't register as a swap dealer, we could go after that. And that's hard to imagine, but
what a $3 billion de minimis.
That was if it dropped. I think we're staying at 8, so
yeah,
higher. But yeah, but you know what I mean, like, and then maybe that does look like an exchange. You could say it's decentralized, but somebody's set this whole structure up. So I mean, I have to look at the definition. There's really specific definitions. Like there's in the DCM definition, it uses another defined term, which uses another defined term. Like trading facility, I think is key. So
well, isn't swap like anything defined as a swap several places? And
well, it's like commonly known. There's 6 prongs. One of them I think is like it looks like the others. One is like it's commonly known to the industry as a swap. Right.
Wow.
So that's right. So that's a little scary to people, but I don't think we've enforced using that prong yet. Someday, hopefully.
We'll do our best. Don't you worry.
I'm sure you will.
So, yeah, Mike, anything?
No, I think I follow a lot of it. It was nice to listen in, and I hope that I think there was something for the financial savvy listeners, as well as for those that are just sort of beginning to investigate these issues because they're into crypto. You can't be into crypto and not start to hear about, you're interested in regulations because they affect the price of what you're investing in. And so I think this is a really good conversation from my perspective.
Yeah. Dave, anything you want to leave people with?
I guess stay tuned. We're shut down now, but there's a few people walking around the building, I guess. And then when everyone else comes back, there should be more happening. People are constantly coming into the lab, and I know somebody who's meeting with the CFTC and the SEC. He's got a token that seemed to me that might not be a security and might not be in our world either. I just want to thank you guys for having me on this. This is really cool. I'll follow up to get the approval. I know, I got to have that approval. So I'll follow up. I think Tony Thompson's probably working in GC, so might actually be able to get the approval before the government even reopens. But
perfect.
Yeah, if you want to have a follow up with the homework you gave me, we can talk about that after, and then talk to Matt too.
All right. So thanks for listening.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it.